and welcome to the YakiCineSoba balloon film special companion piece to the recent literary effect look at the Richard Holmes book Falling Upwards, where myself and him over there,
Nick,
will take a quick look at 3 balloon films. Are you ready to take to the skies?
Just let me drop my ballast in the faces of some peasants.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, we've got
Let's
our
go.
hamper full of champers and rare meats.
I have my leech prognosticating device for telling barometric pressure, so I think we're all set.
Ready to go. So we kick off with the Conquest of the Air. So
all the way back to 1936, although I feel like the version we watched might have been the updated version that was released in 1940, something like that, right?
Further back than that, right? The original version was from 1931.
Oh wow, okay.
And then it was re-released twice. Once in 1936 with the outbreak of the Second World War, and then again, I suppose, I don't know. I'm not quite sure what they added between 36 and 50, but certainly there's some Churchill footage in there. Yeah, so the version you'll find on YouTube nowadays, which is a pretty good print, runs about an hour, is certainly the re-release version from Alexander Korda's London films. And this is one of my favorite. I love the London films, like opening little logo, which is Big Ben, right?
Yeah,
Big Ben. But what I like about it, it's not like dun dun. It's not like that. It's not like rank or something like that. There's something very gentle and melancholy about it, isn't it? It's just I don't know what it is. I love the London films logo. It makes me feel ever so nostalgic. And I like the black and white one here because it turned color later. But the Alexander Korda London Films logo is one of my favorites. Up there with Shaw and
somebody should make a supercut of all the best. Just that because
World of Video 2000. Or,
So yes, this is well. What's interesting? Okay, the brief of this is much broader than balloons, right? So this is really, I mean, what I love about this is, and it actually came up in our discussion just now of the book as well, when you talked about the seagulls at the end. There's this great element of this of being like, "Fuck you, birds!" Like just this humans' outrage that birds have this power that we're denied, and like we're gonna finally put you in your place, you goddamned feathered light-boned bastards. But yeah,
we should say that the 3 things that connect the films is that the book led us to them, right?
Yes, and that there is a section of this that deals with ballooning, but of the 3 of them, this is the one that is the broadest view of just generally, it is humankind's attempts to take to the skies.
It is as well kind of interesting because it's a docudrama, right? It's like a weird mixture of when they do have footage, for instance, the Hindenburg burning, for example, then it'll be there. But when they don't have footage, because it goes back to one of my favorite kind of, again, Monty Python like scenes is they go back to Rome, and there's a guy who's like, I will fly using the art of levitation, and then just jumps off a building to his death. Which is kind of hilarious. And him and Oliver the Monk, and there's a whole section on it's a fascinating the Birdmen, right? Basically.
Yes, yeah. It's just there's something tragic, a tragic comic about that stuff. Right. Because you have to realize people it was like Jackass of the time, I guess.
It goes through to like Roger Bacon and him kind of being accused of necromancy, and Da Vinci and Zoroaster and all that stuff. and of course, yeah, Laurence Olivier as Lunardi, the
yes,
very
outrageously Italian
yes,
early aeronaut. Yeah,
with a basket full of leggy birds, basically. One of which has tattooed him on her thigh,
yeah, his name,
right?
Or possibly she has like a garter with his name embroidered on it, or on her upper thigh. Yes,
quite saucy for 1931 or 1936 or 1940.
It did just remind me of how good actually he was like Sir Laurence Olivier.
Yeah.
That like that he
I'm
he
not sure
really
if this
was.
is the role he's remembered for, but
No, it's not.
no.
But he's magnetic in a way that like that really he completely steals his scene and almost steals the entire film. He's only in it for like 3 minutes. He's so outrageous.
Yeah. Forget about that Richard III. His turn as Lunardi in yeah. That people remember him for.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's basically it's a grab bag, and it's a pretty good starting. I think I was looking it up on the IMDb. Like there's some comments, people who actually saw this in school, right? Like it was a learning tool. And yeah, I guess it kind of works. I mean, you will learn something from it. It is entertaining. It's only an hour long. It does have some great old footage in it as well. And apparently one of the directors of some of I don't know what bit of it was William Cameron Menzies, the famous kind of art director, set designer who made Invaders from Mars. And if it was shot in 31, he would have made it this. And if you've ever seen that movie, he made The Spider, which is kind of like a thriller set in like a theater spook show, which is kind of quite interesting. Anything involved with William Cameron Menzies is usually worth a look. Yeah. And looks amazing as well. So
there's a few parts that jumped out at me were and this actually comes up in the book as well. We didn't mention it when we talked about the book, but like that balloons were initially misunderstood as being the devil.
Well, that's the thing with Roger Bacon, right? That's why he was he was executed for necromancy, right?
Right, but yeah, these scenes of like peasants with their pitchforks being like, "'Tis a devil!" As this balloon kind of flops around. You're like,
that was quite funny.
Okay.
A lot of this is actually surprisingly funny, and I think deliberately so as well, right? Like it's got a tongue in cheek. And if you ever grew up watching Harry Enfield, you can't help but hear the Mr. Chumley Warner voice, right? Hey, look at this now. What is this fellow up to? There's like a touch of that to it, isn't there? Especially when they try and inject a little bit of comedy, right? Was this? Whatever the fuck is going on.
But another thing that blew my mind was like there's one scene where they show somebody actually stoking a fire into the balloon, like that there's a fire in the balloon that they're feeding with like fuel. And I was like,
there's a lot of really interesting footage which kind of goes past in a montage and commented on. And there were a few moments like that for me where I was like, "Oh, hang on, what's that? I want to know what that is." And even it's interesting. What's really interesting as well, just from this perspective of filmmaking, is when you get into when they actually do have footage, they start to have footage, and especially when we get to the Wright brothers and flight and stuff like that. But they still do the intercutting,
dramatic.
I find that stuff kind of maybe it's because it's kind of what I do for a living.
I was going to say, who would you have been cast as in the history
the Saigon
Conquest of the Air? Yes,
it'd be great. I'd love if Saigon did open up its remit to go back like even further in history. It would be fascinating to do older stories rather than just some.
Because I would love to see
Americans stabbing each other in the eyes.
I'd love to see you jump off a boat with a pair of wings for once.
Right.
Tokyo Bay. Yeah. And then there was a whole section about the guy who basically Lilienthal, I think his name was, the guy who invented the gliders, and then they did a whole bunch of just built this big hill and kept jumping off of it until eventually he did kill himself. And, you know, his like last flight. You're like, okay, wow,
elaborate suicide attempt.
Yeah, it took him several years, very well documented. And then there was the one great bit where the guy who makes his like footman or whatever, like,
oh yes,
yeah,
because he was like, this is dangerous. So
I'm not doing this. Yeah, you try that, footman, and the guy storms off.
Again, that's a bit of comedy, right?
Yes.
Yeah. No, I'd say, I mean, the Conquest of the Air, it's not essential viewing, but the thing is, it's up there for free on YouTube, and it looks decent.
Yeah.
You learn a little bit of something, and it's quite entertaining. I would.
And has the Daily Mail always been attempting to lure people to their deaths?
Like, in one form or another.
Yeah, I was like, the Daily Mail's like, we'll pay you cash.
Especially if you're foreign.
Yeah. Which one of them was, right? One of the guys attempting the channel crossing.
Coming over here, stealing our balloons.
Exactly. Actually, one thing that, sorry, I will say one thing that really struck me was, as I was watching this, was looking at like the Zeppelins, right? Yeah. I mean, Zeppelins are fascinating to me.
Yes, they are.
Like, and then to think, well, hang on, my granddad was born in like, I don't know. I mean, he was certainly around in the tens, like 19. You know, like he would have been alive at the time that Zeppelins were still being used.
Right.
That's weird to me to think my granddad might have seen it. I don't know if they were. I don't doubt they had many in Ireland, but you know,
just famous.
They would have been turf based anyway. I would guess you'd have to go and cut peat moss and then feed them in. Yeah, bog Zeppelins.
Bog Zeppelins. Yeah, I like the sound of them. Yeah, so there we go. That's the first bit out the way, I think. So next on our triple bill of ballooning films is a Disney film, and I don't think.
Yes.
Yeah. Me and Nick are not really big Disney consumers in general.
Not. I mean, actually, I say that I do actually have a subscription to Disney Plus.
Okay, but, I'm not a big consumer of Disney. Nothing against this thing. It's just it's funny because when I saw this and the Walt Disney and whatever, it just struck me as like, oh, when was the last time I watched anything that had to do with Disney? It was just and it's interesting as well because it comes. So this is from 1981. Night Crossing, UK, US, West German, corporate, and it does come from that towards the tail end maybe of that period where Walt Disney did put out these kind of live action adventures and like the Witch Mountain films and stuff.
Yes.
Which you don't really think of. I mean, I know Walt Disney and Buena Vista still, well, obviously they have the whole Disney Plus thing, so I'm sure they're making lots of original content for that now. In terms of identifiable Walt Disney productions that would have played on a big screen, don't think of them making these anymore, but at a certain point, they made quite a few of these, right?
Yeah. I mean, well, wasn't Kurt Russell's entire career based on his appearing in multiple Disney live action films, right? And then the Herbie the Love Bug, they were Disney, weren't they? Yeah. So there was a lot, but I think Disney now, well, predominantly does one of two things: either like the actual Walt Disney Company remakes its own animated films as live action films,
right?
Like the Beauty and the Beast. And then they make most of their money through Marvel and Lucas, right, which they own.
Those films are a very different proposition. What I mean is, these are like, I don't know, they hark back a little bit to an earlier era of like High Adventure or something like that. Right?
Yes.
Also, interesting. I swear to God, at one point, Beau Bridges, when they're blowing up a balloon, and I rewound it to check. I'm pretty sure when they're practicing with a balloon and they're actually managing to get into inflate. Beau Bridges does shout, "It's fucking good!" in a Disney film.
I thought he said that too, and I was like,
and I ruined it because I thought it's looking good, maybe.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure he does say it's fucking good.
It sounded like that to me as well.
I'm
Yeah.
wondering if Beau Bridges deliberately tried to stick that in.
Well, he is Jeff's brother, so so yeah, I have to say this movie was a bit of a revelation to me in a few ways, just because I had forgotten. Well, I mean, basically, there's a scene quite early on where the young son of one of the kind of the three families the film follows attempts to storm the barricades at the and for those who don't know, there used to be something called East Germany.
Well, to be fair, I think there's still an east part of Germany. I don't think.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Yes.
I
But
don't think
yes,
you just fall off the edge of the. There's nothing there anymore.
but this is that kind of Iron Curtain era, right? And
Well,
78.
If
I
you
was
watch
thinking,
Night Crossing, you'll get a little history lesson at the very beginning, right? They explain.
That's true.
They explain all about and how pre-wall there's just like a fence, right?
Yeah.
Rather than the wall. But yes, so this is we should probably say basically that this is a film about a true story of the Strelchik and Wetzel families who did escape from East Germany to the West in a balloon in 1978. But carry on.
78. So I am 3 years old when this happened. So I was thinking suddenly that the littlest kid in the balloon is the same age as me now.
It's all about you, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just fascinating to think that these people were, I didn't have to escape Wicklow in a balloon. It wasn't necessary. Had to escape in a plane some years later. But
right.
But yeah, no. But yeah, it's so yeah. What this that scene where he kind of he takes a bulldozer, right, and attempts to ram it into.
Yeah, this is Ian Bannon's son, right? This is another family. Always nice to see Ian Bannon. Yeah, his son attempts to, I don't quite sure what his idea was. He bulldozes the guard tower.
Yeah. And then attempts and then jumps out and runs around and tries. It was a badly planned attempt to get across the border.
Darwin Award material, I believe.
Yes. But I was like, when they suddenly just sprayed him with machine gun fire and there was blood, I was like, oh, hang on, that's a little bit rough for a Disney film.
It's not just that; it's automatic gunfire as well, right? Like no one actually shoots at him. It's like these triggered guns.
Yeah. It was. I mean, I was surprised by that. They've leaned into this. They're not pulling any punches here.
No, it's true. It's. I mean, in some ways, it was a slightly frustrating watch me. So we should mention as well the patriarch of the one family is played by John Hurt.
Yeah, so the very first scene where we first go into the pub and he's sitting at the table, and I was like, oh, I mean, first of all, I always loved John Hurt, but he looked so Winston Smith, which is only like a year. It's only 2 years later that he actually makes 1984, but he's just so perfectly like, oh yeah, who else?
He was the best at just
looking jaded and like exhausted.
Vulnerable character eaten up from the inside, right? Like, no one does that like John Hurt.
His performance is spectacular, actually, from beginning to end, and particularly his big dramatic moment when he kind of has the breakdown after the failed first attempt, and it's a really excellent performance.
Yeah, no, he's always good. And the other family, Beau Bridges and Glynis O'Connor, the father and mother, and so they attempt. So it's a frustrating watch because, like you said, on the one hand, they don't shy away. It's a proper telling of the story and fairly accurate, I think.
Yes,
a few things you could take umbrage at, but more or less it's a fairly accurate telling of the tale. And there's no HD of this as far as I can tell, so it's a bit difficult to tell, but some of the balloon scenes look really tremendous, right? Like in the night skies. I'm not quite sure in 1981 when it was made, I'm not quite sure how I'm guessing they must just be in balloons to a certain extent, like maybe just hovering off the ground or something, but I they wouldn't have had the CGI. But because it's all at night, but it seems to be they're actually filmed in situ to a certain extent, right? There's people in balloons and at least off the ground to a certain extent. so there's that. So on that level, it's very authentic seeming. But then on the other hand, it's, I don't know, it's a bit, I don't know, there was something missing. Like that was good, and then as it gets towards the end, and they attempt once and they fail, and then the authorities find the balloon.
Yeah,
and they try and track them down while it's a race against time, right? And most excitingly, they're being tracked by Slugworth from Willy Wonka.
So okay, I have to say,
Gunther Meisner.
Yeah. I have to say that this film is disconcerting because in a way it starts to overlap in my mind as I'm watching it with Willy Wonka film, because that Willy Wonka film has a bizarre mix of accents. You've got some Americans, some British. It's set in an indeterminate Eastern European looking place that's like that.
They escape in a great glass elevator at the end.
Yeah.
And there's some disturbing scenes of children being murdered.
Yes. No, it's very weird. It feels like it's set in whatever same fictional country that 70s Charlie Chocolate Factory is in, which I suspect was filmed in Eastern Europe somewhere.
I think, if I remember correctly, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory was shot in Bavaria, I think.
There you go. Yeah. So it kind of, anyway. And I didn't even freaking realize that was Slugworth until you pointed it out. And now now it makes all the more sense why I started to think like...
Well, there's two roles that come to mind when you see Gunther Meisner. It's either Slugworth, or he's also in that fucked up movie In a Glass Cage, where he's the former Nazi in a iron lung, and there's that helper who injects petroleum into kids' hearts. Which is a film I need to rewatch. That's a film. Night Crossing's a bit more light-hearted than that, and it's got this Jerry Goldsmith score, which is
I know.
Very Quatermass theme, isn't it?
That plus it's also very like the more triumphal stuff is very similar to the stuff he did for the Star Trek movies. I kept expecting the Enterprise to kind of suddenly hove into view over depressed Eastern Europe. But one thing it's hard not to notice is that all of the bad characters, all of the scary characters, all have German accents, whether they're the housewives who were kind of like sketchy spies, or whether they are the actual, East German police. They all are played by German actors with proper German accents. And then as soon as they're nice characters, like the ones who want to escape to the West, now they have English accents. The
bad guys are led by Slugworth. So that's such a great name,
Slugworth.
But so I maybe you can do a better job, or maybe you disagree with me. Maybe you out and out loved it. I found it lacking, and I find it slightly difficult to articulate exactly. There's something a bit. I don't know. I think it's just the dramatic beats are a little bit too, and maybe it's unfair because it's a 40-year-old family film, but they're a little bit too on the nose. Like, we failed. It's okay. We'll try. It was a little bit. It was a bit too much of a template feel for it. So even though they did manage to ratchet up a certain amount of tension, I nothing blindsided me apart from that early scene of the apart from like I would have liked a bit more teeth to it.
I wouldn't disagree with you. And also, to me, it was slightly overlong as well. It's some trimming I think would have helped with the pacing, especially with the end. As I wanted it to be more tense. I wanted to feel more stress that we're gonna get caught. I mean, I suppose it doesn't help that I knew that they weren't going to be. Because I'd read the Falling Upwards book. I knew they were going to get over that. But even so, I still felt like it wasn't. I never quite had that feeling that they were in imminent danger, except for the part where they fail the first time and they have to walk through potentially that kind of minefield. That part. Though, one thing that I couldn't stop laughing at the very end of the movie, and they do, spoilers. Both families escape, and that one kid, I guess, not the kid. Actually, it's a Bo Bridges character who's like, I just want to be a mechanic. I'm sure my dad would be like, what the fuck? Buddy, it's not that great. But yeah, so they run up to the police, the West German police. I'm thinking, if this was the US, he immediately yells and grabs a guy while the other guy shoots a flare off. And I'm like, they would have been sprayed with bullets if that. Maybe the West German police were very mellow near the border back in those, back in 1978.
Yeah, that's like slightly strange. Like, who, why would they assume they'd be welcome? Like,
and not just that, but but like they don't even establish like we've just gotten across the border. It's just like he goes like, "Where are we? Are we in the West?" And the guy's like, "Yeah." And then the guy's like, "Woohoo!" Grabs the guy, and the other guy shoots a flare right near his head.
I'm wondering if it's as easy to spot, in the same way as it's easy to spot a North Korean in Seoul or something like that. Like,
right.
A pig under their arm and that kind of thing. But no, it's a story ripe for retelling. Maybe it's a mini series or something like that. They can really kind of stretch it out and have less cartoon, like you said, the neighbor who, because that whole thing is. I mean, the one thing I often wonder about the whole Stasi spying on everyone system of East Germany, and some people have probably commented on this in a much more articulate and informed way than I could. But especially in those analog days, you're wondering if there was so much like data collected on it. There's some stupid statistic like 1 in 5 people in East Germany were giving information to the Stasi or something at some point. There was just spying on people. It's just, but the thing is, I'm wondering if it must have been so unwieldy. There must have been so much data, but who would have had, because they didn't have algorithms to look through it in those days, right?
Oh yeah.
They must have had
so
more data than they could have been fucking dealt with. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I often wonder about that, if they shot themselves in the foot a little bit in a way by just having too much info to look through.
And also, weaponizing kind of that like there's just like any small town, any village, any community has those busybody people.
Yes.
And then to kind of to use that, they're not going to be the most trustworthy in that way. They're always going to be looking to make trouble for people, or these are their I
mean, it'll be interesting to see that stretch out a little bit more, and rather than just have the nosy neighbor next door. Actually be interested to go in depth and the relationships between them. And I'm assuming at some point someone's probably written a whole book about this escape, right? Which could be adapted for I mean, I would be interested to watch.
I should also give props. I quite liked John Hurt's wife in this. I thought she also did a very good job, Jane Alexander.
Everyone's pretty solid in it. The only one who's, I don't know, Beau Bridges. Yes. I mean, it might be accurate, but his character seems a bit fucking jolly, considering.
Yes, he does.
The weight. Yeah. I mean, John Hurt doesn't have to do anything. John Hurt just looks like all the time.
Oh God.
Yeah. But Beau Bridges is just a bit.
Yeah, he's really jaunty.
Yeah. Anyway, so finally on our triple bill here, it's a more recent film from 2019, US-UK co-production, The Aeronauts, directed by Tom Harper from a script by Jock Thorne, which is actually, and they do credit.
They do.
Falling Upwards. As
it is based on pieces of this kind of.
And you should watch our other YouTube video where we talk about this book, because I'm sure you don't have anything else worth doing in your life than watching us. So what did we make of? So I have some interesting things to say about this. Well, I think it's, maybe no one else thinks it's interesting, but okay. Well, first of all, let me address something, because this is something that got up my nose, not the film, but this is something that annoyed me. Is so basically Eddie Redmayne plays James Gleischer, right?
Yeah.
Who did go up with
Yep.
Tracy Henry Coxwell, and they established a world record of 10,000 meters or something like that, 1862. All that's kind of true, right? But in this version,
Yeah.
the other man has been switched out with Felicity Jones playing a kind of amalgamation of, I guess, Sophie Blanchard and Miss Stocks and Dolly
Margaret Graham.
and Margaret Graham, who isn't mentioned in the Falling Upwards book. I don't think Margaret Graham. I think that's something I came to via Wikipedia rather than But basically, there was if you've read this book, you will know that there were female aeronauts and very famous, beloved, very putting on a show as well, and adding a bit of glamour, touch of glamour and stuff like that. So I went on the IMDb and looked up some comments, and it's a fucking thing about a little bit of knowledge and there's all these fucking cunts on there who are complaining about this film being a woke film, right? And they're like, it was two men in the balloon, and it wasn't a woman. Oh, why do we have to suffer this political correctness? And this, I immediately wished I actually enjoyed the film more because I would like to defend it. I have thoughts about the film, but of all the things, this is not something that bothers me.
No,
and I don't understand why people. It's not a documentary. It's inspired by true events. Yes, they've switched it, but the thing is, if these fuckers, they've just looked up that one thing, and they don't know that it's perfectly reasonable to have a female character in place of the other character. If you think of this as just a mashup of that era, it's perfectly legitimate.
Yes, no, agreed. I
don't necessarily like this film that much, but
I would agree with you there too.
The people who took issue with this,
taking issue the wrong
with them.
And they're taking issue with entirely the wrong things
for their own prejudice.
Axe to grind.
So stop it.
Agreed.
Stop doing that.
Yeah.
Not you.
But they're going to. That's what that's their whole raison d'etre.
Right.
To be dicks. I just realized actually in looking at the credits here that Percy out of Blackadder was in this, and I never noticed. How did I not notice? How did I not notice
McInnery?
that? Tim McInnery.
Okay. No, I didn't notice him either, actually. I can see him now in retrospect. I can see him haughtily kind of holding a handkerchief or something. But, okay. No, I wasn't paying attention to that either.
But yes, Eddie Redmayne plays our who has a kind of a walking wounded thing going on. He's an actor who does that quite well, actually. Another kind of a bit like John Hurt. He just seems to have that kind of perpetually slightly sad quality about him. And Felicity Jones, who we won't talk about what she's probably best known for.
No, we won't pollute the space.
No. Well, yes. So you can Google that yourself. But yeah, they're both, acquit themselves admirably, I think. And Tom Courtenay, who I'm always happy to see, even though
yes,
in my mind I cannot overlap him with the Tom Courtenay of The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner and that kind of 60s. They're just, I don't see them as the same person at all.
It's interesting. Tom Courtenay now, I've enjoyed seeing Tom Courtenay recently in a number of films. He has this new career of turning up for about 5 minutes in things and just being brilliant and blowing everyone else off screen. And seeming to be really enjoying himself. No, I'm a big fan of latter day Tom Courtenay, I have to say. He always
I liked him back then too. I mean I like him. I love Long Distance Runner and some of those other kind of the Angry Young Men type of films he was in at that time. But he plays Eddie Redmayne's characters. He plays James Glaisher's father, and he's dementia, and he's just brilliant. As you said, he's probably the best thing in the movie.
And Yeah, so I mean, well, how did you get on with this then? Like, what were your, and you watched this with your missus as well, didn't you? So
I did, yeah.
did
We watched it
both of
together. Yeah.
you, did you have diverting opinions, or did you both pretty much come down on the same?
I think it was like, yeah, if we hadn't been watching this for this to talk about it,
Yeah,
I may or may not have stuck it out to the end. It's hard to say.
yeah,
It
I felt it's kind of
didn't
the
have a
same.
it didn't have a propulsive through line for me, you know, and
No,
the decision to break it up and have a series of flashbacks as the thing went on, I felt hampered it rather than helped
yeah,
it.
agree.
In a way, I think focusing on just the balloon flight, which, you know, there's lots of moments of the film I really liked. I liked when the
Yeah,
butterflies first appear, because that's one of
there's
those
some good
things that is,
set pieces, right? There's like, for instance, when she ends up on top of the balloon
yes,
and
yeah,
frozen, and that stuff's played
stamping through
well.
the top, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I thought, yeah. And, you know, I appreciated the fact that, and I guess this is what those grousing assholes were complaining about, was the fact
yeah,
that they let Eddie Redmayne or James Glacier, you know, pass out as he kind of does in real life, right?
right, right.
It was the other person who,
Yeah,
whatever happened to be male, who did most of the crazy heroics. But yeah, you know, it's just you know, the CGI is one of these things that always pulls me out, and no matter how beautiful you make it look, it still immediately reads to me as, oh yeah, that's a lot of nice pixels, nicely arranged,
yeah.
but
The other thing
it
as
doesn't
well is
sell me.
it's
You know,
neither
Frankenstein Island has
a
some great scenes of balloons in it,
and a
real balloons that actually exist.
spinning pink lunchbox as well. And the most
It
beautiful
does have that too,
vegetables I've
and
ever
a lot.
seen.
Yes, and a lot of you know, David Carradine, no, John Carradine, David Carradine's dad,
Yes,
John, doing the power, the
yes,
power,
yes.
the power.
We
Anyway,
really do need to talk about.
um,
Seeing as we've mentioned it a few times now in other things, we probably should do Frankenstein Island. But anyway, yeah. So it also slips between two. So on the one hand, I would have liked to have seen a slightly more down to earth kind of, because the story is gripping enough, and I would have liked to have seen a more low key version
yeah,
in a way, where you know they kind of mined that and did away with the big stunt work set pieces and stuff like that, or if they'd have gone for that a bit more, like, you know what I mean? There's not quite
yes,
enough
yeah.
of that
Hmm.
spread
It's
across the whole film.
neither fish nor fowl.
No,
Um, hmm.
so it's a bit. The end result is, yeah, it's a bit bland, and then
Underwhelming.
yeah,
Yes, yeah. Um, yeah. It's, I mean, it's fine. As I said, you know, but I would say if I stumbled onto this on TV, not having come out of just having read the book and being interested in the seeing some of these stories brought to life, I
yeah,
probably would.
yeah. You would have been hovering over the off switch, and oh,
Yes,
Tom Courtney, and then he would have
yeah,
gone away, and then
yeah,
yeah, um,
yeah.
yeah. Again, and again, of course, we're not necessarily great test example. Like if you're less grumpy old men than us, and you're more in tune with modern day film sensibilities, and that CGI and stuff doesn't, it's your normal because you're younger, for
Mhm.
example, so
Yeah.
it's not so alienating to you, then I can see someone enjoying this film, maybe.
Mm.
But
Oh yeah.
but it's yeah, no, was a bit of a yeah, not quite there yet, kind of.
Hmm.
Still looking for the ultimate aeronautic as feck film, I think.
Well, I think it's Frankenstein Island.